right. And I'm here with my friend Paul Kervick from Vermont, and this is John-Michael from New Hampshire. Paul, how are you today?
I am excellent, John Michael. The sun is back out. The rain has stopped for the moment. And yeah, life is pretty exciting. So
All
how are
right.
you doing today?
Well, we don't have any sun yet here, but I'm hoping greatly that we do.
We're sending it your way, west to east.
We did have some yesterday for a bit, and then it went on and rained again. But that's the nature of the beast. And if that's the worst that could happen, then bring it on, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope we can pick up on some of our previous conversations, Paul, about the way in which consciousness continues to be, shall we say, trapped or invited to be trapped in identitarianism, whereby because we're not like those people over there, you know, whatever those people are, whether they're the you know, if we're on the left, they're the right, or if we're on the right, they're the left. If we're vaccinated, they're unvaccinated. If we're not vaccinated, they're vaccinated. And there's something wrong with them over there. And it feels like, you know, it's a natural tendency to scapegoat, but it does stop us from taking our communities and our humanity to the next level. And it feels like all the stops are being pulled out to do that. One of the simplest examples is, you know, this sign here that means okay.
Yes.
And it's also a mudra in the Hindu and tradition, in the Tibetan tradition. I think it's called the Vitarka mudra, but it also supposedly means now white power. And it's it's an example whereby, you know, if you say certain things or use certain language, somehow it means that you're on the other side. I even ran into this the other day when I used the word citizen to someone who's been studying the sovereign individual, sovereign persons thing. And he's like, no, citizen is their language for people who are caught in the system. I'm like, you know, wait a minute, you know, they don't get to take our words. They don't get to take our language. They don't get to take our symbols. I mean, the swastika, as you well know, used by the Nazis, that meant health and well-being and prosperity in prior. I think that's another Tibetan symbol, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was inverted. You know, I mean, again, a lot of the symbols are getting inverted, like what you're talking about.
Yeah, right. The inverted pentagram and stuff like that. And so, you know, so I just wanted to throw that out there and just, you know, get a conversation going about how we can recognize these things and not get caught in them, still be able to use language and symbols to mean what we mean. And, you know, I guess language always has been a shorthand for other things, right? It's like, but it can also mean many different things depending on the context, the tonality, you know, whether you consider yourself an in-group or an out-group person. So what are you seeing these days? And what is particularly concerning? We can maybe work towards what we can do about it a little bit later on, but I'm just curious, kind of, what do you see?
Yeah, well, I see very clearly that language has been used, and if you go back in time, you can go back to any civilization where there's been wars, where there's conquerors, the narrative, the language, the people who control the language, you know, control the world. And if you really think about language, language is basically a vibration, it's a frequency. And if you look at, through quantum physics, through science, who we are, what we're made up of, it's frequency. And it's why when you can go into a music hall and hear a beautiful piece of music that opens your heart and you feel wonderful, or you can go into, like I used to back in the 60s when I was at Babson in Boston, and hear the Velvet Underground, and we'd sit on these wooden chairs with our bottles of Coke, and the music was so loud that my Coke would foam out of the bottle, and I would get a headache and my ears were splitting. I mean, that frequency can have an effect on us. But I think I notice that most people aren't conscious of the words they're speaking, and that in this time where our reality has brought us once again to this place of ultimate division and separation, the power of language is really, really potent here. And I'll share one example just from yesterday. I was on one of these senior center Zoom calls. And there was a gentleman named Bill Mars, I believe was his name. And he's a ambassador for this thing called Braver Angels. And it's very much a 3D thing, but still their whole thing is the red and the blue and the division. And, you know, for anything creative to happen, we have to have all of us available. And for us to create as a community, we have to have a exchange of ideas, of kindness. And it doesn't mean we have to agree, but there has to be a frequency exchange here. There's a room for that to help create from. So what he was talking about was basically bringing people from the right and the left, you know, the Trumps and the Bidens, put them in a room together, small groups, and see if they can listen and just hear, because they're human beings. They have a life experience, they have trauma, they have their belief, they've built this reality and security around, which has them cause that this is real and that is unreal, or this is good and that is bad, okay? That separation has brought us war and conquering throughout all time. And I feel the opportunity for humanity now, for each of us in our personal lives and our community, is to say, wait a minute, that I'm not this separate thing. I'm much more than that. And yes, I have my experience, I have my beliefs, but guess what? Life is change. Frequency can change. So how do we raise the frequency? How do we invite that? And I'll tell you just the end of this, I listened to his little half-hour presentation. And at the end, they opened it up to people on the call. Well, this young man got on the call and went on this diatribe about how both the blue and the red are evil. And the only way to have this is communism. And, you know, and we have to have the collective, and we need this system. This is what we need. And once again, this guy was really good. He just kind of smiled and said, thank you. We went on with other people. But it's that, again, people, when they get fearful, they hang on to something and they separate from a possible way to create together, to move beyond this fear, beyond the separation, beyond the control that's playing out in our culture. Is that, I mean, how's that speak for you?
That is really center of the bullseye, and I am aware of the Braver Angels work and have taken part in a little bit of it. So,
Great. Yeah,
it's good. It's good because they, you know, it's like the opportunity and the invitation is to see the stereotypes that we're using, to recognize them as stereotypes, and to see the person beyond the stereotype. It's much more difficult to hold on to the stereotype when the living person is right in front of you. Yes. And you can see that there's a lived experience there, not that we're necessarily amplifying that over other things, but you know, you brought up a great example regarding collectivism there in communism. Because there's an element of collectivism that has been completely squashed onto the notion of communism, which has then been demonized as the absolute worst thing. Now, I'm not here to argue for communism. Right. We all know about the Gulag Archipelago and the killing fields and you know, the pogroms. It's not a nice picture when a group of people think they know what's good for everybody else. So we're running into that. Yet I noticed that, you know, whereas the left seems to be more identified with communalism, shall we say, communitarianism, which is not the same thing as communism. Right. It seems that the right, in an identitarian reaction, is like, no, it can't. There's nothing about collectivism that's a good thing. Collectivism is the problem. Right. It's the individual. It's the individual and only the individual. And one can easily see the detriment of both sides when one is not, you know, looking a little bit more deeply at that. But, you know, as human beings, I mean, you wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the collective, you know, creativity and people working together to create, you know, the lights and the, you know, the refrigerator over here and the pen and my glasses and my computer, my phone, the screen here. I mean, we exist, and it isn't only out of a sort of a competitive cooperation, but there is, you know, cooperation at a deeper level. So there's a sense of purpose, a common purpose. So you could be black or white, you know, working to create this product. You could be vaccinated and unvaccinated, or jabbed or unjabbed, to create together. Right. And that doesn't separate us, because, and again, this is what the essence for me.
is it's the heart. It's the creative impulse that is who we are on a soul spiritual level is what we're here to learn. And so maybe we've created this whole separation, fear dynamic in order to wake up and realize that, hey, we're all human beings. We're all here with trauma. We're all here with health issues. We're all here with kids we want to raise and be safe and happy. And that common focus, that common thread that makes us human, that doesn't go away because we're jabbed or not jabbed, or whether we're black or white or Indian or anything else. But as long as we're going to keep gravitating to what our differences are, it goes back to an early conversation we had. We're all source creator beings, right? And what does that mean? It means we are one with creation. We are capable of so much more than we've been led to believe. And what's happened is that we've separated from ourselves ultimately here. And I'll give you a perfectly 3D example that probably everybody looking at this has heard about. Remember the story of a woman who was driving a car, and I might have the details not quite right, but it's all been published, it's real. And some kid ran out in the road and the car was on top of the kid, and the woman got out, 5'3", 100 pounds, lifts the car off the kid, okay? How was she able to do that? She got out of her head and the belief, what's possible or not possible. She came from caring and compassion and the ultimate power that lied within her, and she just lifted that car up.
Yeah.
I think that's the place we're at right now with humanity, is people helping people realize who you truly are and what you're truly capable of if we're able to work together and do our healing work. How does that resonate?
Well, that's a part of the way out. I certainly believe that to be true. And, one of the, shall we say, the veils of misinformation or veils of control or misconception about what's happening, it relates to that very notion that you were talking about, this care, passion, that has been somewhat weaponized in the sense that if you care for your fellow human being, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. And on the other side, there's this, and I've mentioned this term many times, I think, in our conversations, this false binary, where people are caught in these false binaries. You have to believe what I say, or what the experts say, or what this person says, or you'll die, or you're bad, or you're one of those people. There is the nuance in the middle, the whole life spectrum, the scale of possibility that we know to exist in the middle it seems to be gone. And I've been deeply concerned about what I consider to be the weaponization of the care impulse, because I think everybody does care. I think the V'd or the unV'd do care. They are all deeply concerned, but they, the sides seem to be almost caught in a paradigm that doesn't allow them to see the other side as human.
And I think the key, you're absolutely right on it there. The key is, why is that? What is it that's happening? And to me, it's very clear. It's fear. When you move to that place, then fear is run or attack, right? And that's the reptilian brain. So there isn't room for this expanded, reality of who each of us is, or appreciation, because the person who isn't V'd has got the same passion and concern for their health and well-being as they do for their kids and their community as the people that are doing that. You've made different choices based on different information that you've researched. So the point is, we all are caring, and can we learn? Can we share? What do you have? What do I have? Because maybe we can make a better decision. Maybe we can make the best decision for everybody. But the fear is such a key place. And guess what? If you look at media, if you look at war, weapons, that separation that comes with fear, again, it goes to the reptilian brain, and there's only two choices: fight or flight. And that's not who we are. So it's how to invite, how to engage people to move beyond the fight or flight, to take a breath into their heart and say, hey, I'm with you. You know, I care about your health and well-being. And this is my information. And this is yours. You know, is there a way we can support each other to get beyond the division? Okay. I don't know. I think fear is right as the essence of all of this.
Fear is pretty much, in my view, the center of the bullseye on the control paradigm, because it's, I mean, you talked about the reptilian brain. There's an aspect, we've been discussing Charles Eisenstein's article on the mob mentality.
Yes.
And the unvaccinated, and the tendency, and I don't want to say the tendency is all one way, but the tendency right now in terms of a portion of the cultural narrative, as well as policy decisions that are being put in place for, I think, very different reasons,
yep.
Is that excuse me, that the reptilian brain is added to by the mammalian brain, which is a way of that social order has been derived and kept in place for many millennia, I'm sure. The tendency to scapegoat people who are appear to be divergent, right? Looking at that sort of that notion of the divergence, and that divergence can be on many different levels. Obviously, it can look like we're racial or a cultural divergence, but in the case, right, any of those things, and you know, we tend to, I think, as humans, we shorthand. This is kind of the way our brains work. We shorthand reality, and we seem to be getting through our day by doing that, but we're not necessarily very conscious about who we are and what the effect of that is, going back to your comment about frequency. And so there's this overlay of the reptilian brain, which tries to control other people. And there's this whole spectrum of things that we use to control people that we think are divergent, on the starting with disapproval on one end, like dislike, judgment, right? Judgment side, just basic judgment, disapproval, and then kind of working its way over to
shame, blame.
Yeah, shame and blame, active resistance, shame being a huge one. We all have our own, I'm sure, our own traumas with that one. Yeah, I can remember quite a few examples. They come right to mind, don't they? It's like
right there, aren't they?
We know what that's like. We know how bad that feels. And then, of course, moving over and, you know, towards the darker side of cancellation, deplatforming. People have lost their livelihoods. Channels on YouTube and pages and groups on Facebook canceled and removed by the thousands. And then, of course, as you get further along, even as we've seen over the course of history, on the far end of that spectrum, you have things like imprisonment and then assassination,
execution.
Yeah. So it's
but again, what is it that is in our culture right now that people have kind of, again, man, maybe it's the reptilian brain, that they've just kind of separated from the past history. This has happened thousands and thousands of years.
Well, as you well know, the reptilian brain, right? It focuses you on the immediate thing right there.
Right.
Even if it's not something you can fight against, especially if it's an emergency or an apparent emergency, or what we could call a manufactured emergency, where you get a little break and then it's another big thing you have to do. Oh, you get a little break and you think things are good, then it's another, now it's the Delta variant, now it's this, now it's that.
Well, they keep it coming, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. And so how to interrupt, I mean, it's a recognizable thing.
Yep.
And it feels like at the level of information isn't where the entry point is, right? It's just not like my information versus your information. You spoke about having an invitational attitude and about being non-judgmental. So how do you see us being best able to engage these what I consider to be perilous times, where people are ready to sit on their neighbor and jab them in the arm, or where people are ready to send them off to a camp where they can stay until proven healthy or whatever. And when the other side is going, asymptomatic used to mean healthy people, and people can take care of their immune systems, and it's a completely different thing that's happening now, and we're being asked to invest our trust in faraway people who aren't doctors, who don't know anything about us individually.
Newscasters, and
they're not talking about natural immunity. They're not talking about other things that are available, just
Right.
boosting the immune system itself, natural immunity from previous coronavirus exposure, or from having caught COVID, or then what's available through alternative medicines that we know are low cost and hugely effective. And there's this whole paradigm being brought down upon us. And
So let me focus.
How do we
because I
open the
think
window, open the
you were
path?
on something there that was really important in this. Okay, so how do we shift things? Because if people are in this mindset, which is mostly mind right now, okay, the fear set, just fight or flight, and there's really not a room to have a conversation or to even share. Let's just look at that. I remember something early on in my relationship with my wife, Winsong, that was very useful. Because like in many relationships, it's you go through things of arguing and having disagreements and all of that, and it can get pretty testy, and it feels horrible to both people. You don't like the energy of that, but how do you kind of get out of that pattern? And she was a body mind therapist, and one of the wonderful things that I learned as I began to do learning about body work and Traeger psychophysical integration and Rolfing and a lot of different techniques is if we got into one of those places energetically, whoever recognized it first, say kind of buffalo, we'd have a word that was kind of non-charged, which means time out and let's go for a walk. Just get out in nature, go for a walk. And we walk and get the energy moving, get your body engaged, get your heart engaged, feel nature there, which is all going to be supportive of getting you out of that separation place. Then we began to touch, and we get through it every time. And I think that people are so caught up in this that they don't understand or have a clue that maybe they could change that. Maybe they could feel better and less stress if they just go out and walk in nature, or go out and play some basketball, or go out and, be in the sun, jump in the lake, swim, get your body moving, because you're stuck up here. And that's not going anywhere. It's going to be fight or flight, fight or flight, fight or flight. And that's going to be your reality. And that's going to go out and create that field around you, which is going to attract the very thing that is causing all the problems for you to begin with. Yeah. So we have to do something. And it could be very simple to shift the energy.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And the idea of getting out in nature, at that point, you're no longer face to face, right? You're walking side by side.
Yeah.
That in and of itself is a very different energetic. You're still very connected. And of course, nature is a beautiful mirror, and it's, it receives whatever projection, but it's also projecting its own reality, which is
cooperation, balance, life,
beauty,
growing.
life, exactly. Giving. I consider nature to be the giving tree. And so it's like, all right, well, so this is a different harmonic. It's a different energetic, and it's a huge one. And I guess it's easier done, or it seems easier. It's both more difficult and easier in the sense that if you know that the core of your relationship is strong, you know that you're going to get through this, especially if you've gotten through it before. It's like, okay, so this is not fun, but we've been through this before. And sometimes I'll call that shadow boxing, because it's clear that, to me anyways, that the sort of the deeply unseen or unprocessed elements of our personalities that need to be healed, that need to come forward to be seen, to be healed, but don't know how to make that request, come forward and spar, because that seems to be the way that we learned, people fighting for what they needed rather than just asking for what they need, which is a totally different thing.
Again, part of the belief systems, part of the trauma patterning that's happened to all of us since birth on this planet plays out in that. And that's another really important point I think we should share here. And trauma is at the root of all of this, because it's almost like the fuel that's held consciously and unconsciously and physically in your body, whether you're aware of it or not, okay, conscious or unconscious. That is the trigger mechanism to, whenever you run into a fight or flight reptilian situation that's fear-based. So what does that mean? It means there's the victim, there's the perpetrator, and there's the savior. And we all operate with this all the time. And there is no savior, but the system you're talking about, the control system, they've operated with this for thousands of years. It's how they've controlled humanity. You know, problem, solution, be the savior, and the pattern keeps repeating, repeating, repeating. Doesn't matter what politician has been in charge, the same pattern repeats and repeats and repeats, okay? So we're getting this on a very personal level right now with the whole COVID and the whole jab thing. And it's giving us this moment in time of opportunity where we can heal that trauma and realize that we are the victim, the perpetrator, and the savior within our own hearts. And I think I've used this in another one of our podcasts, but if people could just imagine, okay, invite them to imagine that your reality, okay, that you're living in your life, that your kids, that the community, the evening news, all of this reality that you think is real, okay? Say it's the color green, okay? And let's use physicists, let's use science here, okay? That's a certain frequency. And we've all agreed as humanity, we're kind of living in, believing in this frequency where the world is green. Wizard of Oz. And yeah, what we know to be true is that that's one of many colors, but we're not aware because we've locked our density into this belief system, into this reality matrix, okay? And what's happening now is we're moving, and I think you and I talked about this, the Rudolf Steiner, who is great in one of his many writings, but he talked about this time that we're all going through right now. He said, we're going to get to a time, and this is me paraphrasing, where the ultimate of separation, control, and fear is going to operate throughout humanity. And it's a natural, normal part of the evolution of who we truly are. It's a remembering time. And so if we can see the potential to shift that by walking side by side, by tuning into nature, dealing with our own trauma within, you know, get some exercise, eat differently, stop doing all the drugs and alcohol so you're fully present and available in your being, that wisdom will come forward. And as soon as one person does it, it's a frequency, okay? It's going to affect, it's like throwing the pebble in the pond, that your thought, your words, going back to language, are creating reality. And so if one or more of us as a community are holding a thought, are creating language in words and speaking from this place, that frequency vibration is also going to be very helpful in dissipating the duality and the fear and the separation and control matrix.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it speaks back down to needing to be aware of sourcing our own reality at all times.
Yes.
And as much as we may disagree with or be concerned about or frightened by even elements of other people's fright, because we can see, or at least we believe we can see where it may be taking them. It doesn't serve us to go into any kind of opposition with them, even if we are feeling righteously about where we're standing versus where they're standing. It's like and it takes an act of will. I mean, it does take an act of will to say I'm going to be now present with my social world wherever I go, whether people are wearing masks or not, however else they show up. I'm just going to be present and available to that world. I think that's easier done, but when you get sort of to the braver angels level of I'm not saying it's always easy, but it's more easily done. And when I've done it, I've had a much happier time. But when you get to that braver angels part where you really are like, okay, so, this school is trying to continue to do a mask mandate now. When we know that the evidence for that is not there, children do not pass it on. Children are the least susceptible of all. It seems to just end with them when they get it. Of course, nobody's talking about the titers and the natural immunity that we can actually pass from person to person because it's all just been weaponized. How do you feel or how do you see, maybe this is an imagination, breaking through that log jam, going beyond, getting to that side-by-side place, if
Yeah,
you will.
no, that's excellent. And I think for me, it's very clear because I've had personal experience with this, as I'm sure you have. The will is certainly an important part of this, anchoring that in. But to me, the next level, which is what we're talking about here as a way forward, is compassion. It's actually, as you're able, you can recognize the part of you that's in judgment or in wanting it to be different or feeling sorry, whatever that is. But that's just emotional, that's mental, that's part of the old traumatic triangle we're talking about. Moving into the heart, moving into compassion, and compassion is you're unattached to the outcome, okay? You're there and present in compassion for what's going on. And when there's a need for an action or something, you bring your will in, of course, but the compassion is a frequency. And what will happen is that if there's nothing to push against, that situation and the people in that situation, it's almost, it kind of catches them by surprise because there's nothing to push against. There's no right or wrong here. You're just witnessing, and you're there in a frequency which is allowing their perfection to come, that frequency in them to rise. And it may not happen in the moment, but I've seen this over and over, where a day or two later, I'll get a phone call from someone who didn't even want to talk to me because we're in such a different place. But I was just present, listened, we didn't get anywhere other than I was in compassion. I was in my heart. And they call up a couple days, say, you know what? That conversation, there's something about the energy of that. They say, I feel really different. And I just wanted to thank you, So again, if we can get out of the mental, emotional needing something back, I mean, true compassion is just, it's not to get too biblical, but, it's like Christ, it's we are one with Creator, okay? That is who we are, folks. And it's very real. And we're a unique, separate individual human being. Both are true. And so knowing that, if you're only going to operate as the individual place, okay, you're separating from a whole level of being that you are and that other person is that you're trying to engage with. So if you can raise your frequency and be in compassion, that is going to help a lot. That is going to help a lot, I think.
And let's make a distinction here between compassion and sympathy, because I think they
Yes,
get distorted.
good.
So sympathy being you're feeling what the other person, you're feeling bad if they're feeling bad, or you're feeling whatever it is that they're feeling, and you're joining them in their story. Whereas compassion, you're stepping back and you're making room for their story. You're not judging their story. You're not agreeing with their story. You're not disagreeing with their story.
You're present.
You're
fully present in your heart.
Yeah.
Embracing it all
Right.
in the perfection that it is.
Exactly.
And that allows the space, the energetic, for that frequency to shift.
Exactly.
It's not your job to fix it. It's not their job to change. Okay. It's just, we're in this place. Well, so you're honoring the sacred space. The elders, right. I mean, this is it kind of ties in here. I remember, and you may help me because I think it was, who's the wonderful fellow from South Africa, Michael Tellinger. I think maybe it was Michael when he was speaking up here in Vermont, shared the story. And if it wasn't him, some other really wonderful person shared it. But they were talking about a tribe in Africa and how they handled the kind of thing we're talking about, a crime, a judgment, whatever it was. And if I remember this correctly, there was someone in the tribe that got either murdered or raped. It was a horrendous, horrendous thing. And when that happened, the way they handled that was the tribe would stop all work. Everything would stop. They would all build a fire and gather around the fire. And they would bring the perpetrator, okay, and sit him down, or her, in the middle of the circle. And however long it took, could have been days, could have been a week, they would one by one, each person would look at that person and they'd face them and speak about all the good from the moment that person was born that they experienced in that life. Then they go to the next person and the next person. And it went all around as long as it took. No one left the circle. And at the end of it, they just kind of honored everything and they went on with their life. And that person was changed forever. And it was profound. But it's a whole different approach to kind of how our culture and our society has dealt with crime, has dealt with injustices, has dealt with things that we don't like.
Right. Again, the polarities of permissiveness versus, overly punitiveness, which, again, not much space in there. And what you're talking about is more of a restorative kind of
restorative justice. Yeah, nice. Yeah.
And it also reminds me of Ho'oponopono, which is a Hawaiian healing modality, really, which is similar because it's done at the level of community, even though you can also do it meditatively on your own.
Yeah.
And you can elaborate on this if you feel I'm missing something, but what my recollection of it and my practice of it is similar to what you're saying there, but there's also an understanding that whoever's stepping out of and transgressing, that pattern represents something that's deep in the collective psyche. And so when you're interfacing with that person who's done that, it's not like you're saying, hey, you're wrong, you're bad, but it's more like, we have this pattern, we have this reality, we have this agreement that has gone back in time immemorial that it's okay to do whatever it is that it was. And we want to be able to heal this at the source of all things. And in any place that I've been participating in that, I would love to be able to heal that. And if you think about your earlier statement about just walking side by side in non-judgment and compassion and not pushing or pulling, even, because pulling would be, geez, I'd like you to think this. So even though I'd like you to believe that your immune system is strong, that's a pulling in a way, right? That's pulling. There's a conditionality there, or desire, at least in that space. But really, we're talking about a level of consciousness beyond that, in which
well, it's inviting people to consider. It's asking questions.
Yeah.
And if they ask you a question, then you can respond. But it's a whole different frequency.
Than dumping a whole lot of facts in their lap and hoping that they'll be instantly transformed
converted
into a knowledgeable person. Exactly. So it does come back to the notion of building relationships, and it's a hard thing to do, I think. When a parent might go to a school board meeting where they're making decisions, and the school board, they may consider or perceive that those members, that maybe they don't know them, and they're conceiving that those members are making decisions not in their best benefit, not in the best benefit of their children. Again, going back to the paradigm of authority, which I think is greatly breaking down. And again, the paradigm likes to use all these control mechanisms that we've been talking about, whether it's weaponization of words or false binaries, do what we say or else,
drugs, chemicals,
all of that. And it seems that one-on-one is the best way to work these things out, even though admittedly it's not always possible, or at least not evident how one can, going into a group, work something out one-on-one. And going back to the control paradigm and the authoritarian paradigm, eyewitness, it's easy to see, at least from where I'm standing, people making choices out of, again, fear.
Yeah.
If they don't go along with what the CDC says or some other authority figure, that means that they're somehow wrong or bad, or they'll be the ones that end up being outcast.
And that's that separation.
Yeah.
That we're separating from our divine self of what we are and giving our power away to a system that's been proven over and over to be corrupt and not in the best interest, even though that's what's portrayed through the media. But I mean, you look at the lawsuits that have been filed successfully, you look at the documentation. Again, not everyone's going to do that, because a lot of people, it's so confusing and there's so much information, they only want to trust what's on the evening news every night. And so that's challenging. If that's all you're going to base your reality on, and your truth is what some person who's reading a script is telling you every night over and over and over, if you know anything about mind control and anything about the studies that have been done, this is what it is. And So you need to take a break from that and get out in nature, take a walk with someone, just to get out of that frequency control matrix and start to remember who you are. That's why Native peoples for thousands of years would do vision quests. I recommend it highly. No food and water, go out for 24 hours in nature and just sit there and ask these questions of yourself and of source, of spirit, God, however you view it, because we need each of us now to step forward into a different kind of reality that we can create together. And that's the invitation. I believe that's the invitation you and I keep offering here, is to do what we can to assist everybody to just take a deep breath. Is this the reality that you're seeing on the news every night and walking down the street and you don't have a mask and people run away because they're in fear? We can create something different. But each of us has to do our own personal work, and we have to be willing to be in community together. We can honor and at least accept each other's traumas, path, and help each other birth through this time. We're going to do it, but we can do it with, if in the midwives, again, going back to our birth analogy, if you breathe with the contractions, okay, go with the flow, it's less painful. And you're going to have an easier, quicker outcome. But right now, as more you get in duality and the more you get into separation and right and wrong, guess what? You're fighting against the contractions. And guess what? We're all going to birth. The earth is going to birth one way or the other, whether it's a solar flash or tidal things or global war. None of us know that. But the way to get through this and to help each other is to kind of breathe together and go with the flow of what's happening, take responsibility for your own reality. And it doesn't have to be fear. It doesn't have to be anger. It doesn't have to be feeling helpless. There's lots of people here willing to be present with you and help get through this, because we got to do it all together.
Yeah. And in the context of people being given choices now between a job and a jab.
Yeah.
What would your recommendation be in navigating those waters? Because this is not just, I'm gonna have a different point of view and I'm not gonna wear a mask, or I'm gonna wear a mask, or I'm gonna do this or that. This is people's livelihoods.
Yeah.
Right now we're seeing, healthcare workers, we had this conversation this morning, I think, about, hospitals and other places now lacking for healthcare workers, which creates the exact emergencies that they talk about. And so how do we navigate these kinds of waters when it almost is looking like, life or death? Some people feel like they're being consigned to an unwinnable choice. Again,
that's someone else's reality that's being put in your face. Doesn't have to be your reality. Again, you got to trust yourself. What is true in your heart? Is that the job you've always wanted and you love it and you're willing to then fight to keep it? There's attorneys, there's groups, there's people that will go with you and take on that demand, which is not legal from everything I've seen. But there's a way to basically stand up for yourself. Or is this an opportunity to kind of let go of that and be in your truth? Because guess what? You and your kids and your grandkids, if you choose to take that jab, and what's happening to many people, thousands of people around the world, is they're not here anymore. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? You have to make that choice. And certainly you could reach out to other people and kind of be with that process and get some support to make the highest and best choice you can make. And guess what? I've gone through bankruptcy. I've gone through foreclosure. I've lost a family, been disowned. It all came out. It all got healed. And at the end of the day, it was the greatest gift of my life and my experience and the work I'm doing now in my life, having gone through that trauma, going through that experience. It's not easy when we're going through it. But again, if you can breathe and know that there are midwives like John-Michael and Paul and other people around who are willing to be present with you and support you to help you make the choice, whatever it is, that you can't make a wrong choice here, folks, okay? Trust your higher self, trust your heart, not the fear, not the loss of money. This is gonna happen. You don't know what's gonna happen. When we lost everything, My wife and I, we had nothing but the clothes on our back and our tent. Didn't know I had to go on the food stamp things for 6 months. I mean, it was that crazy. And she had 2 strokes and couldn't walk or talk or move. And, it's like, that's about as bottom as I'd ever care to go. And I could have been pissed off at the guy that, stole the stuff. And, there's another whole story there. But no, it was an opportunity. I didn't see it right at the moment, but I did trust in myself and my ability to create in the world, that I knew, okay, that's all gone. Guess what? We get to start over. What do we do today? What do we do today? Friend, I was just sharing with them. They said, oh, you know what? My dad and mom just died. They've got a condo in Shelburne. If you just pay the utility things, I don't need the money right now. I'm going to be selling it in a year. You could just be there. So, the opportunity will come. Your higher self will create what's needed. But as long as you're in the division and feeling you have to make this life or death, that fear, you're not probably going to make the best decision from that place.
Mm-hmm.
So go walk in nature, take a breath, get some support from people that you care about, that care about you, and make the best choice you can make in that moment from your heart, and things are going to be okay. You're going to get through this. And I think that's why we're seeing it play out the way it is right now. It's actually a gift and an opportunity to help accelerate people moving into that source place in your heart and what you're capable of. That's what this time is about for us. So you could see it as it sucks, or you could see it as, maybe there's an opportunity here that I haven't been able to see before.
Yeah, and maybe both at the same time, right?
Yes, exactly.
I think it's good to remind ourselves that, stepping over this threshold, we're gonna hear the reptilian brain, we're gonna hear the mammalian brain, right? Mm-hmm. The social complex brain. We're gonna hear the different things that we've been programmed with, and things that we've agreed to, right? Because a lot of the things we agreed to, I think Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about the first 6 or 7 years of life, that we're in theta consciousness, right? And so we're just really absorbing the messages, and we are taking on as our own the worldview of the people around us. And not every single person does this, but most of us.
Many do, right? Because we want to be part and connected, and we want to be whole.
Right,
and we are.
And we're subject to these much larger, literally larger people around us who are
in our face,
feeding us, and, wiping our butts until a certain age, and we're subject to that, and it can be a good thing, but we're still absorbing those stories, and it's not just their stories, of course, but in the modern age, it's what we're absorbing through TV, advertising, and just observing the world around us. School is a huge part of that programming, and it's not all bad, but it is a programming nonetheless. And so when you step up to this threshold, I just want to encourage people, be willing, and this is part of the going outside, I think, of being be willing to feel the discomfort.
Yes,
willing to accept that you're coming to a place, and we have a choice at this point when the discomfort arises, either to take it as real, mm-hmm. or to just sit with it in that kind of space that we were talking about before. Well, isn't that interesting? My brain is putting out all of these images of what could happen. And listen, there's no question that in this move towards centering ourselves in source, in our own sovereignty, that we are stepping aside from that social matrix control program into what may feel like separation, because it is separating ourselves from that whole matrix of control. And therefore your ego and your imagination may offer you, right, that, oh my God, this is a dangerous thing. Oh my God, I'll be all alone. Oh my God. That's natural. That's a part of.
That's the brain, again, taking us into the future that we do not control. Exactly. And if all your energy is invested there, guess what? You're not in the moment, which is where you create.
Exactly.
And so what we're hoping,
that
you recognize and then can create.
Yeah.
And I'm picturing, as you were speaking, of what does water do on a mountain stream when it encounters a rock?
Path of least resistance, but it eventually wears down the rock too.
Exactly. So we are the water. We are the waters, divine waters of creation. That is who each of us are. And when we bring our currents together, that confluence of care, of compassion, of heart, we're capable to create the world. And I think that's the place that you and I are both now. And maybe we want to touch a little bit, or maybe we'll do another podcast. But I think that what excites me in my life right now is that in a way I can see a lot of what we've been talking about here is kind of densifying and just moving away out of my awareness. It's still there, but where I am and the people I'm surrounded with right now are honoring as best we can. We're doing our healing work. We're dealing with trauma that we've carried and egos and different things, but the heart is key. That's our commitment. And what we're doing is creating a new reality. And we're addressing issues that are important to our local communities here. And I know that, you and I are connected, and you're doing a very same thing in New Hampshire. And I'd like to put out as an invitation to anyone here that may be hearing this, if you're interested to hear more about this, this is a emerging community that's happening across the planet. And it's people who are awoke, people who are waking up, people who aren't awake, but there's something about the attraction of creating a different reality. And together, we are shifting the frequency. And there's the fear, the other stuff, it's still, that stuff's out there, but it's not affecting me. And it's not affecting the people I love and care about. And we're focused on creating and using all of the skills and abilities that we have to do that, and owning our stuff as we go through it. So, that's another wonderful thing that I think is a little light out there for folks, that we're not stuck in what's being present and just everything collapsing. No, we can choose to be part of something that's creating. And that's where I think we want to go. Yeah.
And this is the challenge. And I think you said it before, where you can react to it. And I think, part of the control paradigm, and again, this is connected to the mammalian complex, I think, of social control. And, we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, in the future and with our own groups. I think Marshall Rosenberg, who created nonviolent communication technology, talks about this as well. Millennia of, we used shame and fear to control for millennia. That's kind of how we did it. We used alienating language to put people in their place, and you can control people that way for a while. Mm-hmm. But it's like getting someone to do something because they're afraid of you. Eventually they will rebel, because that's not based on a positive life impulse. It's based on control, and everyone knows what control feels like. That's why we ended slavery. That's why we've gone where we've gone. So it does feel that the part of the technique of the social control at this moment is to get people to feel like they're separate, get them to feel like they're alone.
Right.
Because if you could lose your job, you're going to feel alone in that moment. But as you said, we're in this thing together. There are groups in every state. I know there are in every state, whether it's a stand-up group, a rise-up group, some other kind of group, health freedom groups, those groups in particular. Look for those groups. If you're hearing this and you're not feeling connected, look for those groups. Or, if you can't find one in your state right away, look for one in a contiguous state. Make connection with those people, and they'll connect you back through. And it may take some doing to do that, because I think, sort of in the modern age, a lot of us have sort of got comfortable with being hermits in our house, and we got our phones and our TVs and our refrigerators, and we can have food delivered if we want, but that's not community.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's not community. It's not,
and it may not last given what's unfolding these days. So
we don't know. And again, these systems were set up to, in one sense or another, to maintain themselves, right? It's like, we have a chance to look at these things again. I'm sure we'll talk more about it as time goes on, but I just want to just maybe leave us with this idea that, at one level, can we celebrate the demise of the idea of the matrix idea control pattern. This is what we're seeing right now, coming, I think, from authoritarian quarters, is a last hurrah. Maybe not the last hurrah, but it feels like to me the desperation was like, we got to get this done. I don't know what they're thinking is going to happen if they don't do this now versus some other time. But I feel like the jig is up. All income free. We're all divine sovereign beings, and we're not subject to anybody else's control. And if you feel controlled by me, then there's something out of whack, that I need to either step back or you need to step back, or maybe we both need to step back, have that side-by-side conversation out in nature, out in that place of neutrality and giving, and celebrate to some extent that, as difficult as this is, and it's not to underplay any of the suffering that
Absolutely not. Right.
experiencing, but to celebrate that maybe the different, more humane, more spiritually grounded world that's been talked about by elders across time, by the 13 grandmothers, by the tribes, even now, even today. This is, they saw that America was going to come to an end. As they saw it, I think the promise of America doesn't go away. I think it's the control systems on top. We've had people from Jefferson all the way to JFK and others, warning us about banks and control systems.
Eisenhower, all of them, many of them.
If you give them a little bit, of control of your life, they'll own everything before the time is up. This is what they're trying to do. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. I'm not here to push a particular pattern of consumption or a particular ism, but I think it is to say that those of us who can see that it's breaking up can be, if maybe not happy, might be have a positive expectation of new possibility, and find conversation with each other, ask ourselves, what is the basis of a new reality? What agreements do you and I need to have that can make it so that you can live and thrive, and that I can live and thrive, the ones I love, the people in my community, that no one gets forgotten. And we haven't had that reality yet, for all the wonderful benefits we've had from modern technology and capitalism. There are those still who are out on the fringes, who get forgotten, who get warehoused somewhere, whether it's the elders or the veterans or
the technology's kind of replaced all of that. And that's the thing that has to shift as well, I think, here.
The whole relationship to tech.
Yeah.
That's worth another conversation, probably for another day.
And I would just, to finish up on my end too, is the analogy, again, is always so potent for me, is that of a birth. What happens before that baby's born? You're in one reality, in this contained environment. Something has to separate in order for that birth. The waters need to break. I believe that is where we are now as a human race. And the birth is going to happen, and you can do it with breathing with it and going with the flow of that, and knowing that there are midwives there who will be present, that it's all going to be fine. Or you can dwell in the fear and hold on and not let that birth happen. Yeah. So it's each of ours choice as to how we want to experience this change that is happening to every level of life right now on the planet.
Yeah.
And there are those of us here together that want it to be as easy and graceful and as a community as possible, where we each bring our gifts and appreciate our gifts and want to share them with each other.
Yeah, and there's a lot of caretaking that is possible and that needs to happen as we do that. And can we sit in the uncertainty, rather than get taken away by the fear, to say, well, okay, that fear is there and I don't know what's happening. And of course, we built our entire systems on predicting and knowing what's going to happen. And we don't. I don't think any of us has the truth, and we're not saying that we have the ultimate truth either. But we are. I think.
But we do if we all remember that we are creating it.
Yes,
it's not happening to us. We are going to create this. So what is it you want to create? That's the place to keep our energy focused.
Yeah, and co-create with others around you.
Yes, absolutely.
In a positive vision for who we are and who we can become. So I think that's a good way to.
Beautiful.
Well
done.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, John-Michael. It's the best. Okay.
I'm sure. All right. Take care.
See you soon. Bye.